Have you ever wondered what happened to Mary after the Gospels fall silent? The woman who held God as a newborn, who stood at the foot of the cross when nearly everyone else had run, simply disappears from the pages of Scripture. Where did she go? How did she die, if she died at all? Was her ending quiet and ordinary, like millions of mothers before her? Or is the truth far more mysterious than most Christians have ever been told? For nearly 2,000 years, believers have searched for the answer. Two ancient cities still claim to hold it, and hidden in one of them lies a tomb that was opened and found empty. But if her body was never there, then where is it? Today, we're going to trace the hidden life of Mary, from the few moments Scripture actually records, to the two cities that guarded her memory for centuries, to the empty tomb and a 2,000-year silence that may be the most powerful evidence of all. Many people assume the Bible tells us Mary's story from beginning to end. After all, she is the most famous woman in history. Her face has been painted more times than any other face on earth. Entire cathedrals carry her name. And yet, when you actually open the Gospels and start counting, the result is startling. Across all four Gospels combined, Mary speaks on only 4 occasions. She speaks at the Annunciation, when the angel Gabriel appears to a teenage girl in a forgotten village called Nazareth. And she gives the answer that changed history. Let it be done to me according to your word. She speaks at the Visitation, when she runs to her cousin Elizabeth and pours out the song we now call the Magnificat. She speaks in the temple, after searching 3 days for her 12-year-old son, and she speaks at the wedding feast of Cana, where her final recorded words in all of Scripture are these: do whatever he tells you. Think about that for a moment. The last sentence history ever hears from Mary is not about herself. It is a hand pointing away from herself toward her son. After Cana, she still appears, but she never speaks again. We see her standing at the foot of the cross, when it was dangerous even to be there, and we find her one last time in the Acts of the Apostles. Chapter 1, verse 14. The apostles are gathered in the upper room, and Luke writes that they devoted themselves to prayer, together with some women, and Mary, the mother of Jesus. That is it. That is the final mention. No death notice, no funeral, no burial account. The most important woman in the story of salvation simply steps off the page. At first glance, this silence looks like an omission, a gap the gospel writers forgot to fill. But the longer you sit with it, the more deliberate it appears. Because this is exactly who Mary was. Twice. Luke tells us that Mary kept all these things, pondering them in her heart. The Greek word he uses, symbolousa, literally means gathering the pieces together. The picture of a woman quietly collecting the mysteries of her life, like treasures stored in a hidden room. Her hidden life was not an accident of history. It was her signature. And yet, Scripture does leave us one clue. One single sentence that tells us exactly where to look next. As Jesus hung dying on the cross, John's Gospel records that he looked at his mother, then at the disciple he loved, and said, "Woman, behold your son." And to the disciple, "Behold your mother." Then comes the sentence that opens this entire mystery, and from that hour, the disciple took her into his home. From that hour, Mary's future was placed into the hands of one man, the Apostle John. Which means the question of where Mary ended her days becomes a different question entirely. Where was John's home? The early church had a surprisingly consistent answer. Around the year 180, a bishop named Irenaeus of Lyon wrote down what he had learned as a young man from Polycarp of Smyrna, and Polycarp in his youth had sat at the feet of John himself. Just 2 generations, 2 handshakes away from the apostle, and Irenaeus records that John spent his final decades in Ephesus, a great harbor city on the coast of modern-day Turkey, where he wrote his gospel and died in old age around the year 100. To this day, the ruins of the massive Basilica of St. John stand over the site the ancient world honored as his tomb. So if John kept the promise he received at the cross, and everything we know about him says he treated it as sacred, then a question follows almost by itself. When John went to Ephesus, did Mary go with him? For centuries, that was nothing more than speculation. Then, in the 19th century, one of the strangest true stories in modern church history brought the question roaring back to life. In Germany lived an Augustinian nun named Anne Catherine Emmerich, bedridden for years, in constant pain. A woman who had never traveled, never seen the Mediterranean, never set foot outside her small corner of Westphalia. Before her death in 1824, she described in astonishing detail a series of visions. A small stone house that the Apostle John had built for Mary on a lonely mountain south of Ephesus. She described the shape of its walls, the rounded chamber at the back, the spring of fresh water, the view toward the sea. Her words were written down and published after she died. 57 years later, in 1881, a French priest named Julien Gouillet did something no one had thought to do. He took the book to Turkey and followed her descriptions like a treasure map, and on the slopes of a mountain the locals called Bulbul Dağ, the mountain of the nightingale, he found it. The ruins of a small stone building matching the visions point by point. 10 years later, a second expedition rediscovered the site independently, and researchers concluded that parts of its foundation reached back to the 1st century. Today that house is called Meryem Ana Evi, the House of Mother Mary. And here is the detail that gives historians pause. The Christians of a nearby mountain village, descendants of the ancient church of Ephesus, had been making a pilgrimage to those ruins every single year on the 15th of August, the feast of Mary's passing. They called the place Panaya Kapulu, the doorway to the Virgin. According to accounts from the time, they had been doing this for generations, long before anyone told them about the visions of a nun in Germany. Now, let's be clear about what this is and what it is not. The Catholic Church has never officially declared this house authentic. Emmerich's visions belong to what the Church calls private revelation. Believers are free to weigh them, but they carry nothing like the authority of Scripture. And yet the site has been treated with remarkable seriousness. 3 popes have traveled there to pray: Paul VI, John Paul II, and Benedict XVI. And there is one more piece of history that seems to tip the scales. In the year 431, one of the most important councils in Christian history met to defend a single title: that Mary is rightly called the Mother of God. That council was held in Ephesus, inside a basilica known as the Church of Mary. And scholars have long noted something intriguing. In those early centuries, cities almost never dedicated a church to a saint unless they claimed a real connection to that saint's life or death. When the council proclaimed Mary's title, the people of Ephesus poured into the streets and escorted the bishops home by torchlight, chanting with joy. This city did not treat Mary as a distant memory. It treated her as its own. So there it is. The apostle sworn at the cross to protect her, his documented home and grave. A 1st century house on a mountain, the oldest great council of Mary held anywhere on earth. By now, the case seems closed. Mary went to Ephesus, and Ephesus is where her story ended. But everything you've just heard is only half of the story, because more than 1,000 miles away, in Jerusalem, at the foot of the Mount of Olives, there stands a tomb. And for at least 1,500 years, Christians have called it by one name: the Tomb of Mary. 2 cities, 2 endings. They cannot both be true, can they? And when archaeologists finally entered that tomb in 1972, what they found did not end the debate. It deepened it. To find the second ending of Mary's story, you have to walk down from the walls of Jerusalem's old city into the Kidron Valley, the ravine that separates the Temple Mount from the Mount of Olives. Jesus crossed this valley on the night he was betrayed. Gethsemane lies just a few steps away. And carved into the rock at the bottom of the slope, half sunken beneath the level of the modern road, stands a church unlike any other in the Holy Land. You enter through a Crusader-era doorway and descend a wide stone staircase, 47 steps worn smooth by centuries of pilgrims, down into the cool darkness below the earth. Oil lamps hang from the ceiling by the hundreds, and at the bottom, in a rock-cut chamber, sits a small stone shrine built around an ancient burial bench. For at least 1,500 years, Christians of the East have venerated this place as the tomb of Mary. But is it really a tomb from her time? Or just a beautiful medieval legend built over nothing? That question found a serious answer in 1972. A Franciscan archaeologist named Bellarmino Bagatti, one of the most respected excavators in the Holy Land, a man who had spent his career studying the earliest Jewish Christian communities, was given a rare opportunity to examine the site. And what he documented surprised even the skeptics. Stripped of its later Byzantine and Crusader layers, the core of the monument is a rock-hewn burial chamber of a type used in Jerusalem in the 1st century. The same style, the same era, as the tomb of Christ himself. Bagatti also concluded that the tomb had originally stood inside a cemetery in use at that very time. This is the confirmed layer of the story. Whatever else may be said, the tomb of Mary is not a medieval invention. It is a genuine 1st century tomb. And attached to that tomb is one of the oldest traditions in Christianity. The tradition the East calls the Dormition, the falling asleep of Mary. The story survives in a family of ancient texts known as the Transitus Mariae, the passing of Mary. Let's be precise about what these are. They are not scripture, and the Church has never treated them as scripture. They are early Christian writings, some reaching back to the 5th century or earlier, that preserve what the first communities remembered or believed about Mary's final hours. And across dozens of versions in Greek, Syriac, Coptic, Ethiopic, and Latin, the same core story appears again and again. Imagine the scene as those ancient texts painted. Mary, now advanced in years, is told by an angel that her earthly course is complete. The apostles, scattered across the world preaching, are gathered to her side one final time. She does not die in agony. She simply falls asleep in the Lord, as peacefully as evening comes. The apostles carry her body in procession down into the Kidron Valley and lay her in a new tomb. And then, the accounts say, something happens. In some versions, it is 3 days later. In others, the apostle Thomas arrives late and asks to see her face one last time. The stone is rolled back. The apostles look inside. The tomb is empty, where her body had lain. The texts describe only the burial cloths and a fragrance like flowers filling the chamber. Not one version of the story ends with a body. Every branch of the tradition, in every language, agrees on this single point. They buried her. They returned, and she was gone. Now, a careful listener should pause here and ask the obvious question. These are late texts, filled with legendary details. Can we really trust them? And the honest answer is, not as history, no. No serious scholar treats the Transitus accounts as eyewitness reporting, but here is what makes them historically fascinating. Legends usually multiply endings. One city invents a grave, another invents relics, a third invents a rival story. That is how legends behave. Yet with Mary, the ancient world produced many versions of one and the same ending. An ending in which no one gets to keep her body. It is almost as if the tradition was guarding a memory too firm to change. Even more striking is the testimony of a man who tried his hardest to settle the question, and couldn't. Around the year 377, Epiphanius, the bishop of Salamis, sat down to write about Mary's death. He was one of the most learned men of his age. He had lived over 20 years in the Holy Land itself. If anyone in the 4th century could have pointed to Mary's grave and her relics, it was Epiphanius. Instead, he wrote this remarkable confession. After searching everything available to him, he could not determine how Mary's life had ended. Her end, he admitted, no one knows. Coming from a man famous for having an opinion on everything, that silence speaks volumes. And then Epiphanius added something curious. Perhaps she died and was buried, he wrote. Or perhaps something else entirely, for nothing is impossible with God. Even in the 300s, the door was already open to a mystery. So now we are left standing between two cities. Ephesus, with its apostle and its ancient house. Jerusalem, with its first-century tomb and its unbroken tradition. For centuries, pilgrims and scholars have argued over which claim is true, as if one had to destroy the other. But look closer, and the contradiction begins to dissolve. The Ephesus tradition, at its heart, is a claim about where Mary lived, under John's protection, in the years after the cross. The Jerusalem tradition is a claim about where Mary completed her course, near the places of her sons dying and rising. Many scholars believe the two can fit within one life, years in Ephesus with John, and a final return to the Holy City, where the apostles laid her in the Kidron Valley. Others hold that she never left Jerusalem at all. The truth is, we cannot be certain of the route. The Church has never defined it, and honest historians admit the evidence runs out. Yet notice something. Follow either road, the road through Ephesus or the road through Jerusalem, and you arrive at the very same destination. A tomb that holds no body, a church that mourns no grave. Two rival cities, and neither one ever claimed the only treasure that would have settled the argument forever: her remains. And that brings us to the strangest fact in this entire story. A fact so simple you can state it in one sentence, and so strange that once you see it, you can never unsee it. To understand it, you need to know what the ancient world did with the bodies of its saints. Because what happened with every other saint is exactly what never happened with Mary. To feel the weight of what you're about to hear, you have to understand how the ancient church treated the bodies of its saints in the early centuries of Christianity. Relics were not a curiosity. They were the most precious treasure a city could possess. Christians celebrated the Eucharist on the tombs of martyrs. Emperors built basilicas over a handful of bones. Cities competed, negotiated, sometimes even stole from one another to obtain the body of a single apostle. And we can trace those bodies. Peter's remains were honored in Rome, beneath the hill of the Vatican, where excavations in the 20th century uncovered a first-century grave at the exact spot ancient tradition had marked. James was venerated at Compostela in Spain, Thomas at Edessa and in India. Mark was carried in triumph to Venice. John's tomb was enshrined at Ephesus. For every major figure of the New Testament, somebody, somewhere, claimed the body. And usually more than one city fought over the honor. Now ask the question this entire video has been building toward. Where are the relics of Mary? The answer is nowhere. In 2,000 years of Christian history, no church, no city, no empire, not Jerusalem, not Ephesus, not Constantinople, not Rome, has ever claimed to possess the body of the Virgin Mary. Not her skeleton, not a single bone. Consider what that means. This is the most beloved woman in Christian history. Her veil, her belt, small secondary relics. Cities treasured even these. Constantinople considered her robe the shield of the empire. If any church on earth had held her actual body, it would have become the greatest pilgrimage site of all time. The silence is total, and in the ancient world, that kind of silence is almost impossible to explain, unless the earliest Christians knew there was no body to claim. Some skeptics respond that the silence proves nothing. Perhaps her grave was simply forgotten. But that explanation struggles against the evidence you've already seen. Her tomb was not forgotten. It is still there, in the Kidron Valley, venerated without interruption since ancient times. The early church remembered exactly where they laid her. What they never remembered, what no one ever produced, was what should have been inside. This is the conviction the Christian East had carried from its earliest centuries in the Feast of the Dormition. and the West in the Feast of the Assumption, celebrated on the same day, the 15th of August, the very day those villagers near Ephesus walked to the ruined house on the mountain. Two traditions, two languages, one instinct, that the Mother of the Lord was not left to see corruption. And then, in living memory, the question was finally answered, solemnly, on the 1st of November 1950, before 500,000 people in St. Peter's Square. Pope Pius XII rose to define the Assumption as a dogma of the Catholic faith. That Mary, having completed the course of her earthly life, was assumed body and soul into heavenly glory. It remains, to this day, the only time a pope has exercised that fullest level of teaching authority since it was formally defined. But here is the detail most people miss, and it may be the most fascinating sentence in the entire document. Pius XII chose his words with surgical care, having completed the course of her earthly life, not having died after nearly 2,000 years. And with the eyes of the whole world watching, the Church deliberately declined to say whether Mary died at all, whether she passed through death in union with her Son, as most theologians have held, or was taken up without tasting death. The question was left open, on purpose. So the honest answer to the question in this video's title is one almost no one expects. How did Mary die? The Church's most solemn answer is that she was not lost to death, and the rest. God has kept veiled. Some questions are not gaps in our knowledge. They are doorways into mystery. Now, take a step back and look at the whole arc of this story, because it is strangely close to your own. Most of Mary's life on earth was hidden. No crowds, no recorded speeches after Cana, decades of cooking, praying, waiting, pondering. A life that history's cameras would have walked right past. If you had met her in Nazareth, you would have seen an ordinary woman growing old. And yet heaven was watching that hidden life more closely than any throne on earth. Think about your own life for a moment. The faithfulness nobody sees, the prayers nobody hears, the years that feel unrecorded, unnoticed, unimportant. Mary's story is God's quiet answer to that fear. Nothing offered to him in hiddenness is ever lost, not 1 hour of it, and in the end, not even the body itself. There is one more image worth carrying home. At the cross, Jesus did not simply provide for his mother. John's Gospel says the disciple took her into his home. The early church read that scene as an invitation extended to every believer since, to make room for her, not as a rival to her Son, for Catholics worship God alone and honor Mary as the first and greatest of his saints, but as a mother in the household of faith, still pointing, as she did at Cana, away from herself. Do whatever he tells you. Perhaps that is the real reason her ending was never written down. A death notice closes a story. An empty tomb keeps it open. The Gospels fall silent about Mary, not because she ceased to matter, but because her story refused to end the way stories end. And the silence itself became the testimony. If today your own life feels hidden, if you feel unseen, ordinary, forgotten, remember the woman from Nazareth whose quiet years became the most honored life in history. The God who counted her hidden hours is counting yours. If this video helped you see Mary's story in a new light, take a second to like it, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs to be reminded that no hidden life is wasted. And now I'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment below. Do you believe Mary passed through death like her Son before being taken into glory? Or that she was assumed without dying at all? Your answer could open a meaningful discussion for everyone here. Thank you for watching.